Now, I'm really excited to introduce our next set of speakers. So first up, we are going to have, there we go. We're going to have Henry Muñoz. So Henry is an American activist, business leader, designer, and philanthropist. He has launched national movements, including Momento Latino, The Dream.us, and Latino Victory to support the Latino community through awareness, educational funding, and electoral empowerment. Now, Muñoz bought the premier comedy studio Funny or Die in May 2021, with hopes to advance diverse storytelling in Hollywood in a funny, original, and diverse manner. Funny or Die, FOD. Now, Henry's going to be joined in conversation by Fernanda Favorito. I'm going to turn the floor over to you both and cannot wait to hear this conversation. Take it away.
Thank you so much for your warm introduction. I'm very happy for this conversation today. So first of all, welcome, Henry. We are so excited to have you today with us to talk about LGBTQ advocacy and activism. So to start off, you are a prolific activist. So can you outline somewhat what you've ever accomplished?
Well, I'm happy to be with you here this morning and to have a cup of coffee and to share some of my experience. I've been around for a long time. And what I think I've been able to accomplish on behalf of my communities in the United States is massive change. You know, I was raised in a family of activists during the time of the civil rights moment of this country. It hasn't ended. And I was taught it's important to always be a person for others. And I've tried to use that in the fields of architecture and storytelling to help transform some of our nation's important institutions, because I believe that the stories that have been told by our government, our museums, our universities, our textbooks haven't been inclusive. And I think the first step toward creating equality and cultural understanding is for people to know who we are and who we are as a country. So I think more than anything, I've been a really good designer or architect of change.
Thank you so much for sharing. So you recently purchased the studio Funny or Die. So what are your goals with the studio?
Well, Funny or Die is 15 years old this year, so it's our quinceañera. And we were founded by Will Ferrell and Adam McKay, and it's a place that over the course of those 15 years, every major comic comedian has been a part of their work. I first became familiar with them when I was working with President Obama, and we put him between two ferns at a critical moment in our country's history to explain affordable care, the Affordable Care Act and the access to quality healthcare for the American people. My goal for Funny or Die, the very first thing I bought as the owner of Funny or Die is a great book called Hola Papi, which is a tremendous American story of a young gay man from Oklahoma who moves to New York and has a series of adventures, who bluffs his way into becoming the advice columnist for Grindr. So it's really funny. And I think it's the first step towards establishing a Funny or Die that is funny, original, and diverse, because I think as an activist, what I'd like to do is take that place that has always been a place of truth-telling and activism with people like President Obama, and turn it into a place that allows other people, particularly the LGBTQIA community, to tell their stories. And so that's Funny or Die will become funny, original, diverse, and the stories we tell will reflect that.
This is very important. And can you explain how do we achieve equity in the content that is being made?
Well, the first step is, there's very few Latinos who own, I think I may be the only Latino who owns a major production studio in California. I can't really, there's plenty of us in the LGBTQIA community who are involved in the entertainment industry, but we don't own studios. So I think that's a step forward. And I think given that I'm in this unique position, my job really is to open the door of opportunity to others who are like us. So I think that the way that we achieve equity is by providing the platforms, the opportunities for us to create content, for us to tell our stories, for us to create places of historic stature, for us to be on the boards of the Smithsonian and the national parks. And in the entertainment industry, while we've made progress, I think we have a long way to go until, we're representative of who we are as humanity.
Okay, and today we have a current climate of anti-LGBTQ legislation. So why is civic engagement of LGBT people and their allies important for preserving and advancing LGBTQ rights?
Well, I've been on a journey my whole life. And I think like many people, I was lulled into complacency about 6 years ago when I was working with the Obama and Biden administration and was a part of the effort to create marriage equality. In fact, President Biden married Kyle and I, married my spouse and I, and maybe we thought things were going to be okay. But the reality of the United States that we live in today is that we have a Supreme Court that is systematically taking people's rights away. I don't view this moment, I think it's very important for me to say to everyone on this call that in the place where I was born and raised in Texas, there are active movements of the government to separate children, to make children feel embarrassed by their identity, to separate them from their support system, their teachers and their parents. That's not different than what happened many years ago in the moment after Roe v. Wade, where state by state, people's rights, women's rights were taken away. So I shouldn't be complacent anymore. I should recognize that our community is under attack. I should say that this is a moment when the LGBTQ community seems to be the next target. And so activism has never been more important, and you can do it in many different ways. It starts at the local level. You can run for office. You can support people who share your views for office. You need to be involved because the people who are in public policy making decisions, until there are more of us there will never be equality, and we're in danger. And it isn't just gay marriage, it is equality in the workplace, it's equality in schools, it's representation of everything that we are now beginning to understand we are as a community. And because we are the community that represents the future of the United States, we have to be involved. We have to embrace our power and we have to use it.
Okay, thank you. It's very important for us to stand together for our rights. So what does civic engagement look like and what does it not look like?
Well, you have to vote. I mean, civic engagement means that at the end of the day, you're involved in democracy, right? I think because we've been told to be afraid, because we've been actively targeted by at least one president of the United States and many governors today, and some of those governors are on the short list to be future nominees for the presidency of the United States. It doesn't matter what party you belong to, you have to get in, right? You have to recognize that it's not just what you post on Facebook or Instagram, that they're at the end of the day, right? You have to take an action. And the only way that we will ever achieve equity is by taking that action in the public realm, by voting, organizing votes, running for office, being involved in a community board. In the civil society, you can take action by becoming a board member of an organization that stands for something that you want to be involved in. For me right now, it's chairing a board of the Smithsonian Institution to build a new national museum on the Mall in Washington, D.C. In business, more of us need to be in senior management and in the boardrooms of companies where decisions are also made. And we buy a lot of product. We're a great purchaser. We are movers of the economy of the United States and globally. So more than anything, I think it's that you have to see in your head that I'm going to be involved and that it's going to lead somewhere, and that somewhere has to be action.
Thanks for sharing. We have a question here from the audience. It says, how do you see Broadway as a stage for activism and for highlighting underrepresented stories?
Could you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
Okay, how do you see Broadway as a stage for activism and for highlighting underrepresented stories?
Well, you know that I'm so happy to have that question because this year I got nominated for my first Tony Award for producing a show called Paradise Square, and I want theater. You know, there's theater in communities across our country, small communities, and in New York, right? And I think it's important. Theater is a place that brings people together in one space, that has the ability to tell stories and to create understanding. It's always been a place where the LGBTQI community has been welcomed, in fact, led the way. And so, like every industry that we're attempting to bring our voices into, the theater community is a place where we should be present. We should have writers and musicians and actors and costume designers. It was so incredible for me to attend the Tony Awards this year and to meet so many of our community who are, you know, talented, who won awards, who were nominated for awards, hosted by my friend Ariana DeBose herself, an Afro-Latino queer woman who, and I just think the more that we continue to invest and be involved, the better off we're going to be, because stories are important and there aren't enough stories of who we are. And the more that you tell stories, the more that you create cultural understanding for everybody. I think, you know, I'm very aware that hatred arises when people don't understand who you are. And we're living in a period where people have said that the American dream isn't big enough for all of us, and that's simply not true. The more that we embrace who we are and tell our stories, the better off the country will be. And the theater is one of those places. And it can happen in New York, and it can happen in small communities all across this country.
And for the members of the LGBTQ community who are working towards initiatives regarding housing, education, or infrastructure, what is your best advice for gaining support and gaining momentum in their work?
That's a very good question. You know, I've never done anything that I was educated to do. So, and the way that I taught myself was in my hometown at the local level by getting involved in things like public radio and transportation and the things that I saw around me that could be important to my neighborhood and my neighbors and myself and my family. And I don't think that that's changed much. I think that the way that you start an activist career, the way that you begin to make a change for yourself and for the people that you care about, is by taking one small step toward what you see. And I found in those situations that people are more likely than not to be accepting and inclusive, because communities need volunteers. They need people to be engaged. So my advice would be that you're right. Change begins at the local level. You can affect incredible change, and you don't really need to understand, you know, what you're doing at the beginning. You just have to not be afraid to stand up and to make your voice heard and to get involved. There's really no guidebook except for us, because we do have to. It is harder for us. We can't be afraid to go there and to be engaged. And once you do it and you take just one little step, you realize, oh, okay, I could do that. Oh, okay, I could do that. I mean, how would I ever dream that I would work with presidents of the United States, that the president of the United States would marry, you know, my spouse, Kyle, and I? There's no way of knowing that I would get to chair, like this little boy from Texas, from an immigrant family, would chair the board of a national museum. You just never know where it's going to end up. But if you don't take that first step, you will never know.
We have another question here from the audience asking, what are the small acts of activism that a person can do, and when they don't have such a large platform?
Oh, I mean, put a sign out in your front yard for somebody who shares your values and your principles. Register to vote. Get involved in a food drive or a, something that is going to have. My dad and my mom, they were people for others. My father was a labor organizer, and my mom joined him in that work. And so we were never the people who had the swimming pool or the new car or the great house. We were just the people who spent the weekend on the picket line, right? We were the people who understood that if things were okay for us, we needed to open that door of opportunity behind us. That was a very powerful lesson for me. But what my parents used to tell me, that everybody can be a hero. Didn't matter whether you could, you read about them on the front page of the newspaper or waved at them across the street. And I think that's the fantastic thing about humanity, that even with as terrible as things seem to be from time to time, I come from a place that's not that far from Uvalde, where we're killing our children, and the people there have not lost hope. And so, and it is inspiring them, everyday people, parents, right, to do something, to lift their voices, because sometimes it happens in moments of crisis, but more often than not, it happens in the vacuum where there needs to be something to fill that space. And so no act, whatever it is, and it'll come to you. It will present itself to everyone. It does. You'll know it. And if you go out and you reach for it, you'll change somebody's life. And it doesn't matter if you ever get to stand on a stage or be on a Zoom and speak to a lot of people. You'll know that you've been an architect of change, and it doesn't matter how small it is. In fact, I often think that the things that I've been able to do for other people that weren't public were the most important things I've ever done. I just spent 2 years of my life, 2.5 years now, working in the streets of New York, testing and vaccinating and feeding people. And that's the most important thing I'll ever do. It's not owning a movie studio. It's trying to make sure that people are healthy and fed. Can you imagine being in the richest city in the richest country in the world and having to feed people? Doesn't make sense at all. But there's a situation where many people put their lives at risk, took to the streets, and made sure that others were okay. And in particular, people of color and immigrants and the undocumented and the people who have traditionally had no voice. So whenever we do something like that, we're going to be better than we were the day before.
It's a very important, inspiring lesson. And so my last question too would be, what is your vision for LGBTQ accepting world?
I've learned so much from my husband, now spouse, who is, non-binary, about the way that people view identity in the 21st century. And I really have fallen in love with the way that people younger than myself view themselves and their concepts of identity. And I think my vision for an LGBTQIA+ accepting world is one in which the labels begin to fall away, because there are enough of us in office and policy-making decisions, because there's been many stories told who help explain to others who we are and what our contributions have been to culture and to power, and we tell the truth about it as a nation. And that there is a world now where we just accept each other for who we are and how we view each other and how we view ourselves. And I think that we're on the right path. I think that if we continue to make our presence known, and it won't be easy, because I think we do have to use our power to speak truth to power, and that is never easy. You have to push. But I think if we do, that we'll get to a place that is more fair and more equitable and safer and less filled with the hate that we seem to be living with today. And the only way we're going to get there quite honestly, is to show our power. So I look forward to a day when acceptance actually occurs and where equity finds its way into housing and job creation and marriage, and a day where our government itself stops attacking us so that we can be a light for the rest of humanity. Because, you know, there's when you talk about an accepting world, right? And then you think about identity, every culture in this world has a powerful population and one that is underrepresented and less powerful. And so the way that we handle, I think, as a nation, these issues of empowerment and activism and inclusion and equity can help other people around the country who live in cultures that aren't even as open as ours to become more open and more accepting and more inclusive. So I'll go anywhere. I'm very pleased to be here this morning to join Power to Fly, to share what I've learned over the course of my life, and to say to everyone this morning, really, it's just take a step toward activism and toward empowering yourself and the people that you care for, your neighbors and your community. And when you do, you'll change the nation.
Yeah, this conversation was really good and very important. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. It was such a pleasure to having you today with us.
Thank you, Fernanda. I really appreciate you too. And I appreciate being here to talk with everybody.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.